The winter wind swept through the small mountain town, carrying sharp flakes of snow that danced across the empty streets. The sky was turning dark, and the last light of evening disappeared behind the towering peaks surrounding the village. Clara stood beside an old wooden bench near the station, holding a faded suitcase that looked almost as heavy as the disappointment weighing on her heart. She had imagined this day differently. When she first arrived in the mountain town, she believed she was finally leaving her troubles behind. She had dreamed of a peaceful place where nobody knew her past, where she could find honest work and rebuild her life. The pictures she had seen of the village showed warm houses with smoke rising from chimneys, friendly faces, and quiet streets surrounded by beautiful forests. But reality was much colder. From the moment she stepped into town, people looked at her with suspicion. They noticed her old clothes, the tired expression on her face, and the single suitcase she carried. To them, she was not someone searching for a new beginning. She was just another stranger who needed help. The first place she visited was a small bakery near the town square. The woman behind the counter had smiled politely when Clara entered. "Excuse me," Clara said softly. "I'm looking for work. I can clean, help in the kitchen, or do anything you need." The woman's smile faded. "We aren't hiring," she replied. Clara glanced at the empty tables and the quiet shop. "I understand. Thank you anyway." As she turned to leave, she heard two customers whispering. "She's the woman who arrived this morning, right?" "Yes." "Nobody knows where she came from." Clara pretended she didn't hear them, but the words followed her outside. She tried another place. Then another. Every answer was the same. No. Some people were direct. Others avoided eye contact and made excuses. A few looked at her with pity, which somehow hurt even more. By afternoon, the snow had become heavier. Clara walked through the streets searching for a place to spend the night. She stopped outside the small inn at the edge of town and gathered the courage to knock. The elderly owner opened the door slightly. "Can I help you?" "I need a room for tonight," Clara said. "I can pay when I find work." The man's expression changed immediately. "I'm sorry. We don't offer credit." "I understand," Clara replied. "Maybe I could help clean in exchange for a room?" The man shook his head. "No." The door closed gently, but the sound felt louder than a storm. Clara stood there for several seconds, staring at the wooden door. She had faced difficult moments before, but something about being rejected by an entire town made her feel invisible. She walked back toward the center of the village as the cold began to settle into her bones. People hurried home, closing windows and lighting fireplaces. Families gathered together while Clara remained outside, alone. She looked around and wondered if she had made a mistake coming there. Maybe there was no fresh start waiting for her. Maybe some doors were simply never meant to open. Near the edge of town, she sat down with her suitcase beside her. She pulled her coat tighter and tried to fight the tears forming in her eyes. That was when she heard the sound. Slow, steady footsteps. Then the distant sound of horse hooves moving through the snow. Clara lifted her head. A figure appeared on the mountain path. The man riding toward her looked like he belonged to the wilderness itself. He wore a thick dark coat, worn boots, and gloves covered with snow. His beard showed signs of the harsh mountain life, and his face carried the quiet strength of someone who had survived many storms. The villagers noticed him too. Some stepped aside. Others whispered, "The mountain man is back." Everyone knew him. Ethan had lived alone in a cabin deep in the forest for years. He hunted, chopped wood, and lived far away from the busy life of the town. Some people thought he was unusual because he avoided crowds, but others knew he was the person who would help when nobody else would. Ethan stopped near Clara and looked at her suitcase. "You planning to sleep outside tonight?" he asked. His voice was calm, not judgmental. Clara quickly wiped her eyes and stood up. "No. I was just trying to figure things out." Ethan looked around at the empty street. He didn't need anyone to explain. He had seen the way people looked at her. He had seen the closed doors. "Did anyone help you?" he asked. Clara hesitated before answering. No. A silence passed between them. The townspeople watched from a distance, curious about what Ethan would do. He looked at Clara and then toward the dark mountain road leading to his cabin. The temperature continued dropping. A person could not survive long outside in that weather. Ethan stepped closer and picked up her suitcase. Clara immediately reached for it. I can carry it. I know, he said. But you shouldn't have to. Those simple words surprised her. Nobody had spoken to her with kindness all day. Ethan placed the suitcase on his horse and looked back at her. Ride with me, he said. Clara stared at him. What? My cabin is yours tonight. Her eyes widened. You don't know me. Ethan nodded. That's true. Then why would you help me? He looked toward the mountains covered in snow. Because once someone helped me when I had nowhere to go. Clara studied his face, searching for any sign that he expected something in return. There was none. Only honesty. The people in town watched silently. Some looked surprised. Others looked uncomfortable, realizing they had turned someone away while a stranger was offering shelter. Clara slowly stepped toward the horse. She was still afraid. Trust did not come easily after being rejected so many times. But standing alone in the freezing cold was not an option. She climbed onto the horse behind Ethan. The journey began through the snowy forest, leaving the town lights behind. As they moved deeper into the mountains, Clara looked back once at the village that had refused her. Then she looked forward. For the first time in many hours, she felt something she thought she had lost. Hope. Neither Clara nor Ethan knew what waited ahead in that quiet cabin surrounded by endless snow. They only knew that one small act of kindness had brought two strangers together on a path that would change everything. The path through the mountains was quiet except for the sound of snow falling from the branches and the steady steps of Ethan's horse. Clara sat behind him, holding tightly to the edge of the saddle, still trying to understand how a stranger had offered her the one thing nobody else would give, her place to stay. The farther they traveled from the town, the more peaceful everything became. The lights of the village disappeared behind the trees, replaced by the soft glow of the moon reflecting on the snow-covered forest. After a long silence, Ethan spoke. You must be wondering if you made the right choice. Clara looked at the back of his coat. I am wondering many things, she admitted. A small smile appeared on Ethan's face. That sounds fair. She hesitated before asking, why do you live all the way out here alone? Ethan looked ahead at the narrow mountain trail. Sometimes being alone is easier than being surrounded by people who don't understand you. Clara lowered her eyes. His words felt familiar. After nearly an hour, they reached a small wooden cabin hidden among tall pine trees. Smoke rose gently from the chimney, and a warm golden light shone through the windows. Clara stopped and stared. She had expected a cold, empty shelter, but the cabin felt welcoming. It was simple, with stacks of firewood outside, a small porch, and signs that someone had carefully built a life there. Ethan opened the door and carried her suitcase inside. Make yourself comfortable, he said. The room near the fireplace is empty. Clara looked around in surprise. There were books on shelves, a handmade table, and a warm fire already burning. You live here by yourself? Yes. And you still keep an extra room? Ethan placed another piece of wood into the fire. Everyone deserves a place to rest. Those words stayed with Clara. That night, Ethan prepared a simple meal. It was nothing fancy, but after a day of rejection, the warm food felt like a gift. They sat across from each other at the wooden table. Clara finally opened up about her journey. She explained that she had lost her job, lost the place she had been staying, and decided to travel somewhere new where she could rebuild her future. I thought people in a small town would be kinder, she said quietly. Ethan looked down. Sometimes small places have the biggest walls. Clara looked at him. You really understand, don't you? For a moment, Ethan was silent. Then he nodded. I wasn't always alone by choice. The fire crackled between them. Clara realized there was a story behind his quiet eyes, a story he wasn't ready to tell yet. Before going to sleep, she stood near the window and watched the snow covering the mountains. For the first time in days, she felt safe. But outside that cabin, the town was already talking. People who had refused to help Clara were now wondering why Ethan had taken her away. And some of them were not happy about it. Meanwhile, deep in the mountains, two strangers who had both known loneliness were beginning to discover that sometimes the person who opens a door for you can become the person who changes your entire life. The morning sun slowly appeared over the mountains, painting the snow-covered forest with a soft golden light. Clara woke up to the sound of birds outside the cabin and the comforting warmth of the fireplace. For the first time in a long while, she did not wake up worried about where she would sleep or how she would survive the day. She stepped into the main room and saw Ethan preparing firewood near the door. "Good morning," he said. Clara smiled softly. "Good morning. Thank you for letting me stay here." Ethan nodded. "You don't need to thank me. Everyone deserves kindness." Clara looked at the quiet cabin around her. She noticed the small details she had missed the night before, the carefully arranged books, the repaired furniture, and the tools Ethan used to survive in the mountains. It was clear that he had built everything with his own hands. "I want to help," she said. Ethan looked surprised. "You just arrived." "I know. But I don't want to sit here doing nothing." A small smile appeared on his face. "Then you can help me gather wood." Together, they walked outside the cabin. The cold air no longer felt as cruel as it had the day before. Clara laughed when she struggled to carry a heavy piece of wood, and Ethan showed her how to handle it properly. For the first time in weeks, she felt useful again. As the day passed, Clara began to understand the man who had saved her. Ethan was quiet, but he noticed everything. He made sure the fire never went out or repaired anything that broke, and always placed others' needs before his own. Later that afternoon, Clara asked him a question. "Why did you really leave the town?" Ethan became silent. After a moment, he answered. "People judge what they don't understand. I lost someone important years ago, and after that, the mountains became easier than facing everyone's questions." Clara looked at him with sympathy. "You've been alone for a long time." "Yes," he replied. She smiled gently. "Maybe you don't have to be anymore." Ethan looked at her, surprised by her words. Meanwhile, back in the village, the people who had ignored Clara began to regret their actions. They had seen Ethan take her away and wondered if they had made a mistake. But Clara was no longer thinking about the town. She had found something unexpected in the mountains, not just shelter, but a place where she felt accepted. As evening arrived, she stood outside the cabin watching the sunset over the snowy peaks. Ethan came beside her. "Are you still planning to leave when the weather clears?" Clara looked at the mountains, then at the cabin behind them. "I don't know." For the first time, Ethan looked uncertain. Neither of them realized that this simple meeting had created a bond stronger than either expected. The woman everyone turned away and the man who lived alone in the mountains had found something they both needed, a reason to believe that they were not alone anymore.